James, 67 years old, lives in a spacious house in a quiet suburb of Colorado. He owns 2 properties, a new pickup truck, and enough savings to live comfortably for the rest of his life. But what draws attention isn't the value of his assets, so it's his very personal choice to live alone, quietly, and without attachments. James has been through 2 marriages, and each separation left behind silent scars. Friends, family, and even acquaintances from local clubs have encouraged him to open his heart again, to give it one more try. Some introduced kind, independent, experienced women with similar backgrounds, but James always gently declined and never offended, never awkward. He simply didn't want to. He's not lonely in a negative sense. Every morning he still makes coffee, tends to his yard, reads the paper, and takes a walk. Occasionally, he calls his son who lives in another state. On weekends, he drives out to fish or visits familiar shops. He chooses a life that's quiet, uneventful, and free from anyone else defining his happiness. Everything is arranged in a way that makes him feel at ease. James isn't forced to live this way, and nothing is stopping him if one day he wants to change, but he holds on to that quietness as an intentional choice. It's not that he doesn't have someone beside him, it's that he no longer wants to share anything. And James is not an exception. Many other men have made similar choices. They're not looking for someone else, and they no longer expect to be understood. They just want to live at their own pace, not bothering anyone and not being bothered. To understand why people like James choose a more separate life, we need to look deeper into their inner world, a place of unspoken wounds, where trust once cracked, and where experience has taught them one clear truth: sometimes being alone isn't loneliness, but the peace they've spent a lifetime learning to cherish. The years after 60 are not always as peaceful as many people think. Behind many men are drawn-out breakups, quiet divorce hearings, and documents dividing assets that seem procedural but leave deep marks inside. Each time, it's not just the property that gets split, the trust is torn apart piece by piece, silently and irreparably. The feeling of being used doesn't come right away, but after heartfelt sharing, after gifts that go unappreciated, after the other person quietly walks away when there's nothing left to take, a man begins to question the relationships around him. He wonders, were they ever with me for love or for what I had? With age, people don't have as much time to make mistakes, and not because they fear pain, but because they've been hurt too much already. He no longer wants to start over, no longer wants to build another home, another routine, another bond that could fall apart at any moment. It's not that he doesn't need anyone, it's that he no longer has the energy to move forward if it happens again. Some say it's closing off, but in reality, it's just a way to protect oneself. After years of living with others, giving without counting, and receiving distance and calculation in return, he's learned that sharing doesn't always bring connection. The older one gets, the clearer the line becomes between peace and chaos. What once seemed essential, a life, a partner, a shared home, a lasting bond, slowly becomes something he weighs carefully before taking another step. Because just one more mistake, and what's lost isn't just property, but the final years of life that are no longer enough to start again. That's why many men choose silence, choose to live alone, choose to spend time with themselves. They don't do it out of resentment or bitterness toward anyone. It's simply that they want to live in a space where they don't have to be on guard, don't have to compromise, and don't have to worry that one day everything might fall apart again. However, pain is only part of it. That caution doesn't just come from what they've been through, but from what they've come to see more clearly with age. Money, the very thing that seems like it could help them connect and build relationships, turns out to be what makes everything blurry in the eyes of others. Sometimes they're no longer a man to be understood, but a walking asset. From that moment on, they begin to step back, choosing a life where they feel free from calculation, free from tests of trust, even if that means living alone. At a certain age, when work is behind and enough has been accumulated to no longer worry about tomorrow, money is no longer just a means, it becomes the boundary between freedom and attachment. For many older men, Assets are the clearest remaining evidence of a lifetime of effort. But at the same time, that very thing makes them more cautious in every relationship. The more they have, the harder it is to tell who comes out of love and who comes with another purpose. A sense of caution grows with each unclear experience. Every time someone approaches with special interest, the question arises, if I didn't have what I have, would they still stay? The feeling of being loved for money doesn't just make a man feel misunderstood, it also makes him lose the sense of control over his own life. Even a small gift can be misunderstood. A generous expense can be seen as a signal for greater demands. Every act of goodwill carries the risk of being attached to an invisible price tag. Gradually, they withdraw, and not out of stinginess but to preserve clarity in their emotions. That caution doesn't just come from within. In many cases, even the children or those expected to always stand by their father begin to interfere. There are words that sound gentle but leave a heavy mark. Don't let anyone touch the property you've spent a lifetime building. I don't want a stranger to walk into our home and take everything. Such words make a father, no matter how strong, begin to question the boundary between love and between preserving for his children and his right to love again. When assets become central in every emotional decision, relationships no longer begin with empathy but with calculation. Live together or separately, marry or just be friends, every option is priced. The person involved feels more like an investment than a human being to be understood. In a world where everything can be measured in numbers, many men begin to ask themselves, is it worth putting their heart on the line if what they receive in return is doubt and calculation? Facing too much pressure and suspicion, many choose the safe path. They protect themselves, their property, and their peace. A choice that may seem simple, unburdened, unattached, but it's a decision that requires strength. Because refusing a new relationship isn't avoidance, it's the way a seasoned man protects what's still intact in his life. In that way, they step into a state not quite of loneliness but of intentional separation, a private space that no one can trespass. Living alone is not always a sense of loss. For many men who have gone through the full range of attachment, sacrifice, and conflict, solitude brings a clear sense of freedom, a freedom not earned through arguments or compromises, but a quiet, effortless freedom untouched by anyone's influence. When no one else is around, he gets to choose everything exactly the way he wants: when to wake, what to eat, where to go, when to return. No need to announce. No need to consider whether someone else will be pleased. Every decision in the day belongs to him. There's no one nearby to offer opinions, and no one silently expecting anything. Because of that, there's no pressure, no exhaustion from having to explain or adjust himself for someone else. The feeling of no longer having to endure small conflicts is a form of relief. No more long conversations just to defend a point. No more forced smiles when the other person doesn't understand or care about what he values. When alone, he has the right to be silent without being seen as cold, to keep his distance without needing to apologize. Time once shared for obligations, responsibilities, or habits of pleasing others is now devoted fully to what makes him feel alive: a morning playing golf, an afternoon planting in the garden, a few trips to the mountains, or joining local volunteer work, not to prove anything, but simply because he wants to. Life no longer trails behind someone else. He doesn't need permission, doesn't have to wait, and doesn't need approval to enjoy what he loves. Some may look at that life and see dullness, but for the one living it, it's a life consciously reset. Nothing excessive, nothing rushed, no longer shaped by the need to please. Everything is kept just enough. And that brings a sense of control, one of the deepest human needs in adulthood. In that private space, everything is up to him, from his schedule to how the home is arranged, to how money is invested and health is cared for. Freedom, when chosen at the right time, is not isolation, it's a return to oneself. But every freedom comes with a price. For men who live alone, that price isn't in their bank account or in spending figures, it lies somewhere deeper, in the soul. From time to time, echoes of emptiness rise, gaps that nothing can fully fill. One thing those who live alone realize early is not the absence of others in daily life, but the prolonged silences during special moments or holidays when families gather, greetings fill the air, and laughter echoes through homes. He may sit in front of the TV, sipping tea, listening to the ticking clock. No one asks what he's eating, no one offers to stop by, and there's no one close enough to invite over. Birthdays pass by like any other day. No cake, no candles, no singing. Maybe a few polite messages, but the clearest feeling is this: if he stays silent, no one will even know what day it is. And then come the times when health is no longer the same. A cold, a morning waking up unwell, no one in the house to notice. No one to ask if he's taken medicine. Time drawn out in silence can make a person forget the rhythm of life outside. Gradually, social connections thin out, calls become rare, meetups postponed and forgotten. Losing connection doesn't just make a man feel isolated, it quietly affects his spirit. Some outsiders think he's too closed off or stubborn. They whisper that he's selfish, unwilling to open up. But they don't know that he once opened deeply, tried hard to keep someone, gave away both trust and assets only to end up packing everything back into silence. Judgment comes easily, but no one else lives with his emotions or bears the consequences if he chooses the wrong person again. There are days when he realizes the absence of someone to truly converse with, not small talk, but real, human presence. Without that, a person ends up alone with their inner world, and that world, no matter how deep, cannot replace real connection. Between sharing to be loved or closing off to preserve peace, there is no absolute right answer. But for those with experience, the question isn't which side to choose, it's whether there's another way. A middle path that doesn't give up freedom but doesn't trade away emotion for safety. The answer is yes, but walking that path takes courage. It means reopening a door once closed, this time to welcome something new, not out of need or fear, but readiness. Not every man who lives alone is completely closed off. Some still long for connection, a hand to hold, a laugh nearby. But they understand that without clear boundaries, they'll be hurt again. So they seek balance, not cutting ties, not surrendering either. There are relationships that don't need labels or legals, just mutual respect and presence. A shared meal, a weekend walk, a simple trip without control or demands. Experienced men may even set clear agreements to avoid misunderstandings, and they invest in peer relationships, golf groups, book clubs, travel companions, spaces where they can be themselves without defense. Some go further, turning to therapy not out of weakness, but to face old wounds with clarity. Through this, they learn that pain isn't shameful, it's part of healing. When a man learns to both protect himself and connect sincerely, not out of need or loneliness, he finds true balance. Living alone in later years isn't despair, it's a conscious choice born of deep understanding. They aren't running from affection, they just see clearly what brings peace. Amid pressure to not grow old alone, they remain calm, knowing that companionship doesn't guarantee happiness, and solitude doesn't equal sadness. They choose stillness over chaos, clarity over confusion, conscious living over pleasing others. Their home isn't just shelter, it's peace. They don't justify their choices because they no longer live for approval. If there's anything worth preserving, it's autonomy. So don't look at men who live alone with pity or curiosity. In their silence lies a long journey, lessons learned, mistakes forgiven, and maturity earned. And what about you? If one day you had $1 million at 65, seasoned by life and past heartbreaks, who would you share it with? Or would you keep it for yourself, not to protect, but to live lightly and freely, in the way you truly want? Leave your thoughts in the comments, because your story might offer perspective to another man standing before the same choice.